The Trumpet Daily is presented by Stephen Flurry. The program analyzes world news and history from a distinct perspective and compares current events to prophecies found in the Bible. The program also offers free educational publications, including the Trumpet News Magazine and books and booklets. The Trumpet Daily is produced at the Philadelphia Church of God's home campus in Edmond, Oklahoma, and its sister campus in Edstone, England. More information is available at thetrumpet.com.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
5
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Adolf Hitler believed that his anti-Semitism was different from former kinds of anti-Semitism. He believed his was rational. Nazism as an ideology relied on a very virulent form of social Darwinism. It was not about the survival of the fittest, not even exactly about the survival of the strongest. It was about the survival of the most ruthless. That ideology cannot be reconciled with the religion that preached that all human life is sacred and that we are all created in the image of God. This makes it doubly heartbreaking to see that on the right, some are now preaching neo-Nazism in the name of Christianity.
That is Israeli historian and political commentator Gadi Taub, and he was speaking last week at a conference on anti-Semitism, and he's with us here today on the Trumpet Daily. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. Mr. Taub, happy to have you in the studio today.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.
Yes,
it's a pleasure.
We'll get to maybe the heavier subject that you brought out there in that conference. Was that in Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Okay. Most of our viewers are somewhat familiar with you because we had an interview in your studio in Jerusalem, or Tel Aviv, I guess, last...
It was my apartment, actually.
Yes, your apartment / studio.
Studio, yeah.
And so, yes, we were fascinated with that, as were our viewers. But that said, as popular as you're getting in Israel, and more so in the U.S. with your colleague on the English version of Israel Today, I think it is.
Yeah, Israel Update with Mike Duran from the Hudson Institute.
Yeah, well, maybe before the heavier topics, maybe you could just give us a little bit of your background and what sort of got you into political commentary.
Well, I wanted to be a novelist, and I was writing fiction, and I was doing well. But politics became so intense, and things began to seem to me to be teetering on the edge of a precipice, that I found myself increasingly drawn in to political commentary. I come from a very Zionist home, albeit left Zionist home. My father was from the labor movement. He was Secretary General of the Bank of Israel and then the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission. He was removed when the right, which I now belong to, came to power. But he lost one hand in the War of Independence. It was a really strongly Zionist home, and at high school I wanted to be a musician, and then I wanted to write, and I did children's TV, and I wrote for children, and in a sense you can play around when the seas are calm. When things get stormy, you need to pledge allegiance to one side or another. And then I felt, things are so outrageous with what's happening in Israel that you feel you just can't stand by. So I ended up starting a podcast. I was writing op-ed columns, but then I started a podcast, and now it's a podcast channel with many other programs, and it takes most of my time apart from my university job. I work in a university, and as you know, academia is strongly leaning to the left, so I'm not exactly at home there, but I felt you just can't turn your back on this battle, and it seems to me very similar to what was happening in the US. So after Trump first got elected, you could see the old elites gathering to destroy his presidency and vilifying and demonizing him and his supporters, the ones that I considered, I don't know if the word real is appropriate here, but the originally American creed, which I grew up admiring, was being destroyed by a progressive elite. And the same thing is happening in Israel, with an elite turning its back on Zionism. So you just can't, do what I did, write television drama and novels and stuff like that, and disengage from the crew of the ship when it's in danger of sinking.
When did you realize that it was in danger? Like at what period in your life did you see this happening?
My first book for adults was actually a nonfiction collection of essays warning against what we now call the woke. It was 1997.
Okay.
And when I wrote that, people thought, why is this interesting? A few intellectuals at the far end of some academic departments. But I had a mother that was a latent intellectual and an apocalyptic spirit, and she warned that this is going to destroy Western culture, which frightened me enough to start looking into it. Mm-hmm. And I ended up writing outside the university. I didn't even have my bachelor's degree yet. Mm-hmm. And I wrote a book of essays about postmodernism in Israel, in arts in one section of the book, and as an ideology, the other section of the book. It's called Post-Zionism in Israel, and I thought that it was dangerous enough to merit criticism. And the book became, to my surprise, a bestseller. And at that time, I didn't think the danger was yet imminent. I thought it was, a gathering storm on the horizon. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that book and went about my business of writing more fiction. I wrote a book of short stories, and the book of short stories was actually before that, the book of essays. I hadn't written a novel yet, let's say it like that. And then came the collapse of Oslo. I was when the so-called peace process began to fall apart. Yeah. And Israel was not waking up to reality. I was gradually drawn away from my belief in peace with the Palestinians and the whole, what I now think of as the peace religion, the secular religion of peace on the Israeli left, and that process was very gradual. And I'd say politics, it was not a sudden thing. Politics just got a larger and larger portion of my time.
Yeah. The collapse of Oslo, what were you doing or thinking around the time of the Gaza pullout? I think that was in 2005, so a little over 20 years ago.
This was, I was right in the middle. I mean, the politics were moving in one direction and I at the other, and we ended up meeting around the idea of unilateral withdrawal. I'll explain that. I supported peace with the Palestinians for two reasons. One, I thought that Zionism is about the right of all peoples to self-determination, and we can't demand that right while we deny it to another people. And so that was I'd say the altruistic argument, and then there was the egotistic argument that I said, in order to preserve a state that is both Jewish and democratic, we need to preserve a Jewish majority, and so we had to partition the land and confine Israel to a territory where we are a clear majority. So I first supported Oslo and thought, let's do this, let's do it through peace, and then realized they don't want peace. And that happened in 2000, in October 2000 at Camp David, when then Prime Minister Ehud Barak, now revealed as a close associate of Jeffrey Epstein, gave Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader, what we thought was the most that we can give. And Arafat said no. And it suddenly occurred to me that they do not want a state. We were imagining the Palestinians in our image. We said, oh, they're like Zionism. They're a movement of national self-determination. And so they are aiming for political independence. And so we believed we could strike a deal with them. Mm-hmm. And then it turned out they were not about self-determination. They were about destroying the state of Israel and killing Jews. And that's a different form of a national movement, and one that you cannot, there's no middle ground between killing all Jews and making peace. There's no, let's kill half the Jews and then there's nothing, you can't negotiate with that. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, they don't want peace. We can just walk away and confine ourselves to the territory where the Jews will have a steady, stable majority. And this is why I supported unilateral withdrawal from Gaza with a great majority of Israelis. So you'd have all those believing in peace, and then all those closer to the center like me, they all supported unilateral withdrawal from Gaza. And I still have op-eds from Haaretz saying, now those nationalist Israelis will see, because Gaza will turn into the Singapore of the Middle East. You'll see that once the Palestinians, the boot of occupation is taken off their necks, they will prosper and they will make business with us, and we will all have hummus and fish on the beaches of Gaza. And then we get out of Gaza, right. and they shoot rockets at us, because killing us is more important than preserving their own lives.
Yeah.
So after that, I learned the lesson, and I think, after October 7th, certainly, there's no way we can partition the land. This is not a constructive national movement. It's a destructive one, and we have to win the battle against it.
It's interesting what you say about kind of imagining the Palestinians in your image. Because on this program, we've been pretty critical. You told me before we went to air that you're kind of waiting and seeing how the Board of Peace and the efforts by President Trump to bring world leaders together and to try to make peace between nations. As part of that, they've got the committee over the Gaza Strip, and at Davos, Jared Kushner had the speech, and he had the pictures of, I think we have a clip of that. We'll just skip ahead to it since it seems like it ties in about now. This is clip 6.
We have achieved a peace deal in Gaza. We have brought the hostages home, all of the bodies except for one, and we will bring that body home too. And maybe most importantly, we have created a sense of hope for what the future can bring in Gaza and all other places where the Board of Peace will operate.
What do we do next? How do you implement peace? And as you guys know, peace is a different deal than a business deal, because you're changing a mindset. And in Israel, there was 2 years of very intense war. For the people in Gaza, there was more than just 2 years of war. They had 20 years of hopelessness, being ruled by a terrorist organization. And I think you'll see today we've achieved more than thought was possible. And our ambition is still to go for something, I think, better than most people think is possible as well. Number one thing is going to be security. Obviously, we've been working very closely with the Israelis to figure out a way through de-escalation. And the next phase is working with Hamas on demilitarization, which I'll talk about in a second. But without security, nobody's going to make investments. Nobody's going to come, build there. We need investments. And then New Gaza. It could be a hope. It could be a destination, have a lot of industry, and really be a place that the people there can thrive, have great employment. Once this starts going, we think there should be 100% full employment and opportunity for everybody there. This deal only happened because we worked with Israel, we worked with Turkey, we worked with Qatar, we worked with Saudi, we worked with Egypt. I mean, everyone worked together. We worked with UAE. We all worked together to make this happen. Our goal here is peace between Israel and the Palestinian people. Everyone wants to live peacefully. Everyone wants to live with dignity. Let's put our efforts towards promoting those who are doing the work to build this up, like Ali and his committee. Let's focus on the positive stories, and let's just calm down, turn a new chapter. And if we believe that peace is possible, then peace really can be possible.
So pretty optimistic, but it's obviously right at the start. So what do you think? Given what you saw the light, I guess, in 2000, I guess, when Arafat just said, no, we don't want a state, we want to kill Jews. I mean, do you feel like with Hamas still there, I mean, they obviously have taken a beating, but they are still there.
They are still there. And what concerns me about what Jared Kushner said is that everybody wants to live in peace and everybody wants security. Persistently, we don't take religion seriously in politics. They are serious about their religion. Killing Jews is more important than living. And so the idea that what we call the conceptia, the misconception that caused us not to see this coming, is that we thought, like Jared Kushner, like Barack Obama, that everyone wants to raise their children in a safe environment. Everybody wants to come home in the evening, have food on the table and a decent job, and that's just not true. Some people are very, very serious about their fanatic religious beliefs, about their crazy anti-Semitism, and this is why, we kept warning against an Iranian bomb. This fanatic religious fundamentalist regime in Iran could have, radical individuals can commit suicide bombings in the name of Allah, a regime can do something suicidal in the name of Allah if it's serious about its beliefs. So this is the optimistic version, and I think that what we managed to do here, the Israeli side, along with the Americans, is create a framework which does not in advance decide what the Palestinians are and would do. So this is now, there is a path to a peaceful coexistence, and there is a threat of continuing the war. Hamas, there's no doubt in my mind that Hamas will not lay down its arms voluntarily. And so, the question is, who will do it? We don't want Americans to do it. The last thing we want is to have American men and women spill their blood on our behalf. This would play into the worst enemies of Israel in American society. This would be heaven for Tucker Carlson. and we, Netanyahu said this, and Mike, my colleague, and I wrote this, I think, 2 years ago, maybe more. We wrote a piece before I was kicked out of Haaretz for heresy about the judicial reform. Mike and I wrote a piece that said, paraphrased Churchill and said, give us the tools and we'll finish the job. We are the boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. We are the boots on the ground for the United States in the region. We will fight the wars of the West. We are the front line of Judeo-Christian culture in the war against jihadi political Islam. And we will do the same in Gaza. I don't expect the Qataris, the Emiratis, the Turks, or anyone else to disarm Hamas. I don't believe they would. If Jared Kushner thinks there is a chance they would, we're giving it a chance. But we've got our weapons, cocked and loaded.
Yes.
And the IDF is ready to move in, and I think eventually it will. And I think that this is what Netanyahu is thinking.
Yeah. I mentioned Netanyahu's tweet before we went to air. This is what it says. The announcement regarding the composition of the Gaza Executive Board, which is subordinate to the Board of Peace, was not coordinated with Israel and runs contrary to its policy. Because Mr. Kushner said there that he's worked with Qatar. They're working with Qatar. They're working with Turkey. They're working with Israel. I mean, how much have they actually worked with Israel on this, transforming Gaza into this this vacation paradise?
I think there are different currents within the administration, and one current, the Witkoff and Kushner, are pushing the most optimistic version and are willing to work with people who are Hamas sponsors. And for Israel, this may mean a failure to achieve the goals of the war. So if Hamas remains on its feet with an umbrella of an international force in which Qatar and Turkey have a say, that means that Hamas has survived the war and we have not won it. We were persistently against the internationalization of the conflict in Gaza, because exactly for this reason, because we feared that under an international umbrella, they would be able to reconstruct their terrorist state and gather force for the next October 7, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and we will not be able to do anything because you do not send the IDF in defiance of a force sanctioned by the United States. You won't be able to do it, and you might be stuck in a situation where an optimistic administration, or even a hostile to Israel administration like the Biden administration, would put its foot down and would enable Hamas or turn a blind eye to what Hamas is doing, and it would be like the frog in the pot of warm water, gradually being boiled. So that's the nightmare scenario. However, there is another scenario that seems to be, or that possibly is being formulated behind the scenes, in which there would be a truly new Middle East. And in that case, we would have an economic corridor competing with the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which goes through Pakistan from the Far East, and the other corridor, the suggested, what we think is being cooked behind the scenes, would go from India through Saudi Arabia, through Israel, through Greece and Cyprus to Europe, and would be a major transportation route for energy. And if this is the case, then the price of internationalizing Gaza would be worth paying, especially since it would become the interest of all involved, including the United States, to have a peaceful Gaza. Because you can have your economic corridor with Hamas sitting on the faucets with, explosives. You can have, it's like having ISIS holding the bottleneck. So if this is the plan, then the interests rather than the intentions will lead to a disarming of Hamas, which, as I said, probably only the IDF can do.
Yeah, and how do you think the international community would, given how much hostility there is toward Israel from Western nations, do you think that they would support something like that?
Well, I read with much delight the national security strategy document that the White House has produced. And there, what was amazing about it is, Trump is an original, and he thinks anew of everything, and he just completely discounts Europe. So if Europe continues down the path it's going now, it will not be relevant. It will not be Europe in 20 years. And also, Europe is so lacking in vitality and its readiness to use force or anything. It's just, a friend of mine who's a very interesting commentator, Dan Shiftan, was often on my show, and he once printed a T-shirt and said, in every security situation, ask a European what to do, then do the opposite. So Europe is just dragging behind, and it has no moral backbone now with all these progressive leaderships. It's completely surrendering to progressivism and political Islam, and so it has to be bypassed. And when you see the way the White House is now analyzing the global situation, it is asking who are the partners that can actually shoulder the burden of security with the United States. And so South Korea and Japan are going to have a share in the burden of protecting the Indo-Pacific. And Israel is going to have a share in protecting the Middle East and possibly, the Eastern Mediterranean. And then is Europe going to shoulder its own burden, or would Trump have to take Greenland and start reorganizing the whole thing? And the other thing that made me optimistic about that document is that it's a return to a world order based on self-interested nation states, where you can calculate the behavior of states because you have a realistic conception of them, instead of a messianic idea that you will turn everything into an American democracy. And the document says we're not going to tell other people how to rule themselves. We're going to create incentives and limitations on international behavior, and we are going to punish lawless behavior, and we're going to help whoever is going to help themselves in making their own country great again. And although, you don't often compare Trump to Kissinger, like in the, general demeanor, but I think Kissinger would just have signed that document with very few reservations.
So going back to Europe, there have been a few stories even this past month, about Israel's, deepening cooperation and alliance with Germany over the Arrow 3 missile defense, and just technology, cybersecurity, that sort of thing. What do you make? I mean, do you see European strength down the road? I mean, as you say, they have kind of gone woke, and there has been weakness, but it does seem like, from even what we covered during Davos, that some of the things President Trump said, it was alarming to leaders in Europe. Whether or not they do something about it and take more of their own defense on and so forth remains to be seen. But the world, it just seems like there's just been so many dramatic changes in recent years, and if it seems like if Europe wakes up and sees now that maybe they're not going to rely on President Trump or America the way that they once did, there certainly is history there to show that there's been strength at times coming out of the heart of Europe.
Yeah, I think that the Ukraine war has woken some of them up. There's a struggle within European countries between the woke and the forces which the woke called populist as a way of denigrating them. But I think we should call national democratic forces or sovereigntist forces. And suddenly they understood that war is a possibility, and that if Putin wanted to drive tanks all the way to Berlin, there would be nothing to stop him unless America does. And I think it's a good thing that Trump says, well, start taking care of your own security, because so many years of the American security umbrella has caused their character to be corrupted. And it caused them to conduct irresponsible international policy, because they never pay the price for anything. There's always daddy that would come and cover their, overdraft. Mm-hmm. And I only hope that Europe is still vital enough to change its domestic policy before everything else, because it's surrendering before political Islam in the name of multiculturalism, and political Islam is telling it that it's not about multiculturalism. So in the name of multiculturalism, you let a force in that tells you it wants to dominate you. It wants a unicultural Islamic society, and it's going to impose it. And and you can see the friction, because the whole conception of separation of church and state is a Judeo-Christian conception. It fits in with the Christian religion and with the Jewish religion. It does not fit in with Islam. Islam is about overtaking the public sphere. And so it's not something that you can just accommodate, unless, there are, moderate strains that you can cultivate and make your peace with. But if a group tells you it is your enemy and it is going to subdue you, then you can't just treat it inside your multicultural puzzle and marvel at how wonderful diversity is, because they're against diversity.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how that during Obama and Biden there was just a blatant hostility toward Israel, and that's not the case. It's not overtly hostile coming out of the Trump administration. But how, just looking at that alliance between Israel and America, I mean, how strong do you feel like you read the public statements here and then you wonder, is there a spat over this or that? But do you feel like that between Bibi Netanyahu and President Trump and their administrations that there is a close, strong alliance?
I think that the relationship is uniquely strong. There never has been such a strong relation between an American president and an Israeli prime minister. And in Israel, this is a decisive factor even in elections. Netanyahu can get elected on the force of his friendship with Donald Trump. It's not the only factor, but it could be a very strong factor, because we understand that the Trump administration is a unique opportunity for Israel to advance its own interests, and we need to efficiently work within that time frame, and we want a prime minister who can do it. That said, the important message is, in our opinion, the American interest, as understood by Donald Trump, is advanced by a strong Israel. And so it's beyond the question of friendship. If you have a misconception of American interest, as Obama and Biden had, where you thought that appeasing Iran and appeasing your adversaries in general is the way America should go, then Israel is an obstacle to that vision, and it was. This is how Obama saw Israel. It was an obstacle to his attempt to appease the mullahs of Iran. But if you understand American interests the way Trump does, then Israel is America's largest aircraft carrier in the Middle East, and it has proven its mantle. It's able to project force. It is willing to take great risks. It's willing to put its own population in danger. I can't tell you how many times we went to shelters in these last 2 years, sometimes 3 times a night. And the Israeli population is tough, and it's willing to take that burden. And if you want to withdraw American forces from the Middle East, you either abandon it, like, I don't know, Tucker Carlson would want, in which case you can have a brewing third world war, because you have Iran rushing to a nuclear weapon, or the other way to go is you withdraw American forces and work through your allies. And I think we have proven that we are the toughest, most efficient ally that America can have in the Middle East, given that if you want to block China in the Middle East, you need to block Iran. And if you want Iran blocked, how did the 12-day war that we called the rise of the lion, how did that work? It's a quote from the Bible. Am kelavi yakum uke'ari nasa. A people will rise like a lion, and like, it's a synonym for lion, and like a lion, it's not roar, but a stronger word. So if you want to control the rise of Iran, you need forces on the ground. And we proved that we can do it. And Midnight Hammer was just, the cherry on the pie. And that's not a good image for a war, is it? But that was the final stroke that we needed, and that only the United States could provide. What's brewing now is, as we speak, we don't know if Donald Trump is going to strike Iran or not. We feel that this regime should be toppled, because whatever, if it survives, it will take a deep breath and start aiming for a nuclear weapon again. And in that case, we just pushed it back a few notches. We think it should be toppled, and I've said this on Israeli TV, and I think Netanyahu certainly understands it. We should, when there is a conflict now, direct conflict between Tehran and Washington, Israel should not jump in front of the cart. We should not start this war. We should not beat our own thump our own chest. We should not make any noises, because this is for the United States to decide. Whatever it decides, we will then formulate our policy accordingly. Hopefully, after it does, we will be glad to help, because, as I said, Israel understands perfectly that it can help save American lives, and that we live in that neighborhood, not you. And so it is also just that we carry the burden.
Speaking of Iran, as you know, there's been a lot happening there over the last 5-6 weeks. The guys put together a montage just kind of summarizing the last month or so. This is clip 2.
And anti-government demonstrations are spreading to more major cities across Iran, even as officials threaten to intensify crackdowns and prosecute protesters.
Facing threats of arrest and even the death penalty. There's no sign these Iranians are backing down.
I've made the statement very strongly that if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard. They were going to hang 837 people. And I said, in the very strongest of language, don't do it. And they didn't do it. So that was a big thing. And from there, we'll see what happens.
Well, if they keep killing people, will you go back?
Well, I don't want to talk about that because I don't want to put myself in a position. I can't say that. I don't want to say it because I think it would be stupid for me to say that.
The U.S. and Iran are reportedly preparing for talks in Turkey this week in hopes of easing tensions between the two nations.
We have ships heading to Iran right now, big ones, biggest and the best. And we have talks going on with Iran. We'll see how it all works out. Right now, we're talking to them. We're talking to Iran. And if we can work something out, that'd be great. And if we can't, probably bad things would happen.
So you've got on the one hand the U.S. Navy's heading to the neighborhood. Then they've had the uprising, and there's been a lot of reports saying as many as 40,000 civilians have been slaughtered. And then yet you've got more negotiations and talks, I guess, this Friday maybe in Turkey. It's between Witkoff and Iranian officials. So you're of the opinion you think there's going to be a strike, but what do you think about the negotiations with the mullahs?
Yeah, I think what the United States is now demanding is not something they can agree to. This regime, if it has to admit that it has given up its nuclear program, that goes against their... For them, the nuclear program was their plan to destroy the West, which is what their raison d'etre is. It relies on nuclear weapons. They're not going to be able to conquer it with tanks. And so giving that up permanently is such an admission of weakness that the regime might not be able to survive. So if America sticks to that demand, which it currently does, then war is inevitable. If the United States backs down, then that would have serious consequences. But you know, looking back at the way Trump behaved, everybody was saying that Midnight Hammer will never occur. Right. Everybody was saying, he's not going to do it. They're talking, they're doing this. And if you look back at what Trump is doing, has always been doing, his adversaries like to say that he is all over the place and has no consistent plan. But if you look at what he does, he always has an olive branch in one hand and a grenade without a pin in the other. And the options are very, very stark. And I think he's doing that again. And since I think the Iranians cannot take the olive branch the way it is offered, it is my guess then that this game leads to war in the end. So
you feel like just sitting down with them actually helps, because you feel like that, as you said, you wish the regime was gone and that the U.S. would take care of it and that Israel would just stay quiet and then maybe come in as a follow-up to support the aftermath of it. But I guess, do you feel like sitting down with the mullahs or their representatives is something that is a good thing? I think it's useful domestically for Trump. I think that for the same reason that Israel should not jump ahead of the game and start the war itself. I'm speaking about domestic American considerations. You don't want the isolationists in America thinking that Trump is just rushing into a war. So you certainly don't want America seeming to follow Israel, and you also don't want people saying that this could have been negotiated and instead Trump, like George W. Bush, just was too eager to play with the military toys. You want the United States to go to this war after it has convinced its own public that it tried all other options. I guess, though, when you look at just some of the comments Witkoff and Kushner made coming out of those negotiations that included Hamas, I mean, I mean, Kushner said there in the clip we saw, it is a terrorist organization, so I'm not saying they're just best friends, but I mean, they did have some pretty positive things to say about the willingness of Hamas, Qatar, Turkey, and everybody to get together and to try to make peace. And in those same negotiations, I forget where they had the meeting, Erdogan, I think, insisted that Bibi not be there. He wouldn't go if Bibi. So I mean, just the contention, the strife, the hatred for Israel, it seems like that's obvious and palpable. And yet, hearing from some of the U.S. representatives coming out of those meetings, I mean, to me, it just seems like it's overly optimistic and that we can work with anybody. I mean, on the Board of Peace, you know, President Trump said we want everybody on the Board of Peace, and then the next day he announced that Canada couldn't be because there's the spat between him and Canada. So yeah, I don't want to doubt their sincerity. I think they're as you say, there's the olive branch in one hand and then the weapon in the other in case it doesn't pan out. But how is it different? How do you differentiate, let's say, Obama, who negotiated a lot with Iran? He did it more discreetly. And President Trump and his administration, who is negotiating now with Iran and you know, announcing it and letting everyone know. What's the difference?
The difference is in the aim. Obama was pretending to contain Iran while creating the framework in order to let it prosper, the regime, not the Iranian people, and also create a protective umbrella for it to move ahead with the production of nuclear weapons under the guise of civilian use of nuclear energy, which is also always dual purpose. It's not, you can't really tell the difference. And the JCPOA was just a cover-up for the Iranian rise to hegemony, and the sanctions were a cover-up for Iran to bypass them. Mm-hmm. And when you move to the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, he withdrew from the JCPOA, right, and he clamped down with them on sanctions. So if the aim of negotiations is to neutralize the negative forces, and that's one thing, and if the aim of negotiations is, as they put it euphemistically, in the Obama and the Biden administration, both Obama administrations, let's be honest, they called it regional integration. Mm-hmm. That's not the same as containment. Who do you want to integrate if not Iran? So you're trying to restructure the Middle East, creating a new balance between the Shiites and the Sunni by letting Iran rise. I spoke on my podcast to Secretary Pompeo as he left office, and asked him what was the difference in policy between the Trump administration, the first one, and the Obama administration. And he said three things. One, Iran is the problem, not the solution. He said that was their conception. Secondly, the Palestinian veto over negotiations with the Arab states, between Israel and the Arab states, should be bypassed. And thirdly, there should be a credible threat of force in the Middle East. You need a strong force in the area. And if you remember John Kerry saying answering the question, if there would be peace between Israel and any Arab state before peace with the Palestinians, and he famously answered with his famous droop, no, 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 no. And yes, and that's what the Trump administration understood, because it understood that in the new Middle East, the problem of the Arab states is not Israel and it's not the Palestinians. It's the rise of the Iran, which is undermining Arab regimes all around it by spreading its terrorist proxies. And so the interests of the Gulf states were aligned with the interests of Israel. So you need to think anew, the way Kissinger and Nixon did in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War, when they understood that Egypt could be pulled to the Western alliance away from the Soviet camp. And so now what the Trump administration understood is that the Gulf states and Israel have the same interest, and therefore you got the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords were a result of this realignment, and also the result of Netanyahu's bold move to defy Obama. When he went to give a speech before the joint session of the two houses of Congress, over and against Obama's objections against the JCPOA. He did something very bold, and the Arab states looked at it and said, this guy can be trusted because he's not afraid even of the American president. So, and he said, we are going to fight this with or without America. That was the message. He didn't say it in these exact words, but that was the message that the Gulf states understood, and therefore they reached the conclusion that Israel is an effective, trustworthy ally which has an interest parallel to theirs. And that led to the framework which Trump and Netanyahu could then work out together in a breakthrough in the structure of the Middle East with the Abraham Accords.
So what do you see, what are the significant dangers that you would see to Israel hitching some of its security to the United States superpower, even under a Trump administration?
I think that one of the lessons we learned on October 7 is that we need to have the manufacture of weapons in-house. Because what the Biden administration did, and Netanyahu recently remarked on this more, and we now, and I knew it as it happened, we just didn't want to speak about it. There was an embargo on weapons by the Biden administration trying to force Israel to stop the war in the service of regional integration. Because in their view, they managed to force Israel to make concessions to Hezbollah in Lebanon. They managed to make the Saudis make concessions to the Houthis in Yemen, and they've pacified the Middle East in the service of Iran's proxies, and now only Hamas remains, and they need to shut down this war so that Israel doesn't infringe on Iran's Gaza interests. That was their conception, and they had an embargo on weapons, which recently Netanyahu said cost us many lives. And I know this because we bought D9s, which are necessary in clearing houses from terrorists. And many IDF soldiers died because the D9s that we have already paid for were not delivered by the Biden administration as a means of forcing our hand not to go into Rafah, not to continue the war. So instead of demolishing these rickety structures with D9s, soldiers had to go into booby-trapped buildings, and many of them got killed.
Switching back to Iran, what does Israel think? You mentioned Israel just kind of staying quiet and letting America take care of it. When 40,000 Iranians are murdered basically by this radical Islamist regime, and I mentioned on my show yesterday, the New York Times International edition basically just ignored the story until maybe January 16th or 17th. Then they finally covered it. They had to because the numbers were coming in that they were being slaughtered in the streets. So, and then Israel, for its part, you defend yourselves against a massacre on October 7, and of course the whole world just blows up. There's an outcry. Nothing is said, virtually nothing is reported, and I mean, there's two angles to that, I guess. I'm kind of curious about just the ordinary Israeli citizens' take, but also just those citizens in Iran and what they're thinking right now. Again, the jury's still out, and maybe America will strike, but there seems like there'd be a lot of sentiment in Iran that, well, America's abandoned us here. Yeah. But what do the Israelis think when they I assume you get more reporting in Israel about what's happening in Iran?
Yeah, we think no Jews, no news. You know, when the Iranians kill 40,000 innocent demonstrators, then that's second page news. When Israel kills 100 terrorists hiding behind, schools and kindergartens, and then 100 are already a genocide. The West accepted Hamas numbers all along this war. This war was conducted against a terrorist organization hiding deliberately among civilians, and yet the rate of civilian casualties per combatant were lower than any other modern urban war. When the United States and its coalition fought against ISIS, they leveled cities in which the ratio of civilians per combatants killed were 9 civilians approximately per 1 combatant. We managed mostly to keep it under 3, and yet this was considered genocide by the world media. Of course, a genocide means an intention to eradicate a people, not a war against terrorists who are hiding behind civilians. But think about it. If you want to be morally responsible, if you say that, well, if they are hiding behind women and children, then we will not pursue them, then you are encouraging the strategy of hiding behind women and children, and you're letting the terrorists win the war. So it's morally irresponsible to stop a war because this tactic is used by the enemy. And if you look at the rules of war, and specifically at the Pentagon's interpretation of the international rules of war, then if a terrorist is hiding behind civilians, the civilian casualties are on their hands. They are committing a war crime, not the people pursuing them, of course, within limits. Right. You don't bomb a whole city for 2 terrorists. You don't bomb a hospital for 1 soldier. But if a hospital becomes a headquarters for a whole terrorist army, you have to make clear that you will not be able to hide from us no matter where you go. So it's very easy for the international media to say, oh, Israel is bombing hospitals. But these hospitals were command centers and army camps masquerading as hospitals with, indeed, a few medical facilities above them. But the idea that you can have your army base from which to shoot at our women and children and just call it a mosque and then we will not be able to do anything is preposterous. And one advantage, is Israel showed that it would pursue its enemies not just under difficult circumstances, but also over and against the approbation of the whole world. The whole world can say that Israel is evil, and the whole world can judge us by their politically correct double standards. And in the face of the approbation of the New York Times, we will still pursue our enemies.
No Jews, no news. I like that. Going back to that cold open, wow, we're already almost out of time. That was supposed to be my lead segment. What you said at that conference last week about Hitler's anti-Semitism, the ideology could not be reconciled with the religion that preached that all human life was sacred and that we are all created in the image of God. And then you said this makes it doubly heartbreaking to see that on the right, some are now preaching neo-Nazism in the name of Christianity. We have, I think we can go just a few minutes over, but this is, let's play the number 7. These are some conservative commentators that have had some nasty things to say about Israel and the Jews.
I mean, all people I know personally who I've seen be seized by this brain virus, and they're not Jewish. Most of them are self-described Christians, and then the Christian Zionists who are, well, Christian Zionists. What is that? Right. And I could just say for myself, I dislike them more than anybody.
This idea that we are on the precipice of another Holocaust, this is not grounded in reality, and it's not healthy.
So we do need to convince everybody the Fourth Reich is not rising. Settle down. I'm not a Nazi. I hate the Nazis. When you stop the conversation, everyone gets completely paranoid and suspicious. That's one of the reasons, main reason I interviewed Fuentes. It's let's just get it out there. If you disagree, tell me how. That's fine. What's wrong with that?
Buddy, it's Führer Friday. It is Hitler Friday.
Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's well, he was also really cool. So, time to grow up.
It's not Israeli derangement syndrome. I certainly don't have it. We need regime change in Jerusalem, and we need it tonight. Okay? Everything that comes out of Netanyahu's government is a stone cold lie.
You pushed the Israeli prime minister to make this deal, to get a ceasefire, to apologize to Qatar. Can you push Bibi Netanyahu to recognize a Palestinian state?
Yeah, I mean, I had to push him a little bit one way or the other.
The president of the United States could only get that peace deal done by actually being willing to apply leverage to the state of Israel.
These characters are just being inserted into places to serve Israel. That makes Israel the master of the universe. And that's troubling because this is a state that has a hexagram on their flag. Okay, they're even lying about the history of the Star of David. It's a hexagram. It's a cult.
You know, Judaism is a faith. Israel is a state, and it is not above critique. And that what Bibi Netanyahu has done to the Palestinians since October 7th is a Holocaust. It is a Holocaust that is being committed on Palestinian children and women.
All roads lead to the occult. Yes, it is an occult nation. There's no question about that. Everything that they are involved in is occult. And that's why we have to sort of wake the world up to this very quickly, because they have a lot of power. And the only way that we are going to be able to fight this is by being willing to tell the truth.
Now, some would say the root cause of this is, particularly like the Tucker crowd, well, we just want America first. We want to isolate. Israel controls too much of, you know, Washington's foreign policy. But what do you feel like is the root cause of this, I guess, anti-Israelism, to just put it nicely, but the Jew hatred, you know, that we're seeing, not just among some prominent commentators, but, you know, there were protesters in London last weekend that were out in support of Iran, the regime.
Yeah.
And of course, we know all about the Hamas demonstrations in America, in London, in, you know, Western nations. So what do you feel like? We talk often on this show about root causes. Of course, we go to the Bible often and look for an explanation there as our go-to source. But what do you feel like is the root cause of this problem?
Well, the root cause of anti-Semitism is a very complicated question, but the way it is used consistently, those who are anti-Semite end up being anti-Western, because Judaism is, and the Bible is, the foundation of the Judeo-Christian tradition and Western culture in general. It has a few foundations, some come from ancient Greece, but the Bible is right there among the central pillars of this civilization. And once you reject Judaism and reject the Bible, once you become anti-Semitic, you don't have to be Jewish, but once you become anti-Semitic, what you are doing is removing one of the foundations of Western culture. And I'm not surprised that people like Tucker Carlson end up supporting Iran, or end up not knowing who the good side on World War II is. Was it Churchill or was it Hitler? Because once you remove the pillar, then the house, your ideological house, will crumble.
We will have to continue this conversation. Just so that you know, we took you a few minutes over. We won't charge you for any of those. But just so that you know, we're going to try to get Gadi in this afternoon to record a bonus segment that will show on tomorrow's program, but we'll leave it there for today's episode. It's so great to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here.
To be able to visit the campus. He's going to be giving an assembly to our students and faculty here in about an hour or so. And then, as I say, we've got some more excitement lined up for this afternoon. So that's all for now. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily. We appreciate you joining us on today's show, and we'll see you again tomorrow.